It was the feeling of wonder that comes from being in and seeing life, all of nature. The curiosity for what it was all about. I believe there was a purpose in it, a design, and I never lost that belief.
So who is Will Henry Stevens? He was apparently a very quiet man. People who knew him said he didn't act like an artist.
He was an individual who loved the woods, loved the outdoors, was definitely a naturalist at heart. Someone who took his observations of nature and put them on paper and canvas with a great deal of seriousness.
Well, he had a good sense of humor, very good, and we sort of understood each other. He loved music, good music. I can see him practicing around the room, too.
He is important because his work is so accessible to people. Stevens' work is perhaps even more important to us today than during his lifetime, because he was very much concerned with the environment.
He was seemingly passionate, even as he appeared to be an ordinary person.
Hi, Professor Pesch. Good to see you.
Wow, wow.
We brought a lot of things out of storage for you.
This will be very exciting. See what you have. I've never seen these things.
Definitely, and this isn't even all of it.
Wow, beautiful. One of the interesting things always is his color. No matter what range of color, it's sharp and clear, contrast. Then again, his sort of almost automatic writing when he does these trees and all these little bits of nature. He was born in 1881, November 1881, and grew up in a relatively small town on the Ohio River, Vevey, Indiana. His father was a pharmacist or chemist, so that he helped his father as a boy in preparing formula and so forth. So this influences his later interest in creating his own medium and making his own mixtures of clay and emulsions and fixatives and things like that. And he did all sorts of experiments. His mother's parents had been to that rather extraordinary experiment in Harmony, Indiana, that was a sort of socialist scientific experiment. So he was exposed to idealistic and utopian ideas very early on, and I think they're a part of his makeup. Another important influence from his parents were he seems to have become acquainted with Emerson and Walt Whitman and Thoreau, and that they read aloud some of these. And his earliest show in New York had a quotation from Emerson.
In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods, we return to reason and faith.
Will Henry Stevens was trained at the Cincinnati Art Academy, and at that time, we're at just the beginning of the 20th century, he was trained in the traditional academic training. In other words, you try to record on canvas what you see. So in that sense, he comes out of that traditional training. And then his very first job was as a designer for the Rookwood pottery. He therefore was sent to New York to do the tile designs for the Fulton Street and the Wall Street subway stations. He did study at the Art Students League around this time, around 1907, 1908. He didn't like the bold handling of William Merritt Chase all that much. On the other hand, the people that he fell in with were Van Perrine, Jonas Lee, and he actually knew some of the Ashcan school. A number of those people were among his friends. So he had always this feeling of wanting to do sort of more concern with design and color and composition as much as recording exactly what you saw. Will Henry Stevens had his earliest exhibit in New York in 1907 and another one in 1908.
It is evident Mr. Stevens has looked long and lovingly at nature, particularly in the rendering of wood interiors is he happy, giving agreeable suggestion of depth of heavy tree growth, of vistas and openings in the forest that impress one charmingly. All told, there is a strong personal note. New York Newspaper Review.
From that time, so far as we know, he earned his living as an artist. He also set up classes in Louisville, Kentucky, and elsewhere. His own classes, not connected with an institution. As early as 1914, he won a prize in Richmond, Indiana, which was his native territory. And there was a very good newspaper interview about how he didn't feel the need to go to Europe. He felt he could find in his own backyard, so to speak, the subjects of what he was doing.
A painter would go far to find a richer field, but to paint it, one must love it. For my part, I must feel rooted to a place, a sort of ownership in it, or I cannot take the expression of it seriously.
One of the stories that he told to friends and to his students as well occasionally, that when he exhibited that first year in 1907 in New York, that a shabby old man came in and looked at his work and admired it very much. And this turned out to be Albert Pinkham Ryder, the sort of romantic visionary of, really in a sense now we think of an earlier generation. And he apparently said to Will Henry Stevens, "Oh, you're a poet. Keep your fantasies." Now we're in another world. This is probably Stevens at his most realistic, I suppose you want to call it American scene, but this is a scene along the Mississippi River, I'm sure. Here you see some sort of tugboats or whatever, and the small buildings that are characteristic of the countryside. And again, he seems to have loved the countryside. There are apparently some urban paintings, but not really very many. While Stevens was at the Cincinnati Academy, he met the artist and metal worker Grace Hall. They were married in 1910. They had a daughter, Janet.